We are back now with more on the breaking news out of Washington, D.C. 67 people are dead after a U.S. Army helicopter collided with a passenger jet coming in for a landing at Reagan National Airport last night. We are told there are no survivors.
It was the deadliest commercial plane crash in the United States in more than 15 years. A short time ago, President Trump addressed the nation about the tragedy, and we continue our live team coverage now with ABC's Nicole D'Antonio, who is standing by live at the scene in D.C. with the very latest. Nicole.
Well, that's right, David, Lauren, and you may be able to hear here this afternoon, Reagan National Airport is back open. And right now, as the NTSB takes over this investigation, one big question is what was going on inside of that aircraft that caused them to collide? All through the night and into the morning, a massive and desperate effort to reach any victims from the midair collision in the frigid waters of the Potomac River in the nation's capital.
Despite all those efforts, we are now at a point where we are switching from a rescue operation to a recovery operation. At this point, we don't believe there are any survivors from this accident.
64 passengers and crew on the American Airlines regional flight 5342 from Wichita, Kansas. The deadly midair crash seen in this EarthCam video. The plane was on final approach to land at Reagan National Airport just after 8:45 last night when it was hit by a U.S. Army helicopter on a training flight.
Did you see that?
There were 3 soldiers on board the Army Black Hawk helicopter. The Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, speaking from the Pentagon this morning.
We do know on our side who was involved. It was a fairly experienced crew and that was doing a required annual night evaluation. They did have night vision goggles.
Officials say both aircrafts were in standard flight patterns in a very busy air corridor within sight of the U.S. Capitol. The night skies were clear. Ari Schulman was driving home when he looked up and saw the plane falling from the sky.
It was illuminated bright yellow underneath, and there was a spray of sparks on the underside of the plane.
An NTSB GO team is on the scene. President Trump this morning at the White House.
We'll find out how this disaster occurred, and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy on his first day on the job promising a thorough inquiry.
We will not rest until we have answers for the families and for the flying public. You should be assured that when you fly, you're safe.
Now, the body of the plane was actually found upside down in 3 different sections in waist-deep water. We also know the wreckage of the helicopter was also found. David, Lauren.
Nicole, thank you for that live report. We're going to dig in a little deeper on this story and bring in ABC News aviation contributor John Nance. John, tell me what you're making of this story so far from what you've heard.
Well, the number one thing to keep in mind is there's never just one cause, but we have a very contributory element here in the fact that the controller basically shifted the responsibility to the helicopter pilot in terms of saying, do you have the aircraft in sight? And the helicopter pilot, of course, thought that when he responded that he did have it in sight, he was looking at something, but apparently it wasn't the same airplane. So we have a thing called see and avoid that has been a problem in aviation since the very beginning. Sometimes, even though we're responsible for seeing and avoiding, we don't have the right aircraft.
Talk a little bit about this flight pattern. We understand this is a busy flight pattern with the flights going over the Potomac, and then you throw in a U.S. Army helicopter on a routine training mission. How these events obviously don't happen. This is such a rare incident, but what could have factored into that, and could it have been a problem with the fact that the control tower passed that off to the helicopter?
Well, that's what you normally do, is you normally, when you're in VFR, visual flight rule conditions, and you're the controller talking to the different aircraft, you want to make sure that they have a visual contact with the other aircraft that you're trying to make sure they have separation from. That's where things apparently broke down. That's the last portion of the see and avoid problem here, was that they did not see the right aircraft, as far as I could tell. Now, I caution that almost always our first ideas about what happened are wrong. There's much more complexity to it. But I think I'm right about this speculation, at least as far as one of the bedrock elements that we're going to find was that what the helicopter pilot thought he saw was not the business, or not the jet coming in on final approach.
Jim, I got to ask you, you know, it's just a short time ago that President Trump addressed the nation through a press conference about what he knew on this case. And he basically politicized the disaster, blaming the Obama and Biden administration for hiring practices that led to the disaster, along with suggesting mistakes were made by air traffic controller and possibly a mistake by the military pilot. He didn't offer any evidence to support this feeling except to say that there was common sense to him. So I guess the public is going to ask at this point, is it safe to fly, considering what the president is saying?
Well, that rambling conference aside, and with a lot of blame, and blame has no position really in accident investigation. Let me answer that this way. Every single day over the planet Earth, we launch at least 100,000 revenue flights on which any of us could buy a ticket, and we get them back safely again. I don't live on the air talking about these things, but if we had a bad accident rate, that's exactly what I would be doing, because we'd be dropping airplanes everywhere. We finally managed to figure out how to take a very human situation here, or enterprise, and that is commercial aviation, and make it almost 100% safe. The fact is, we haven't had a major accident in the United States since with an American air carrier and a large loss of life in 16 years. And before that, we would never go a year without a major accident. So is it safe to fly? You're safer by far flying in a commercial airliner anywhere than you are driving to the airport, and that is factual.
John, we appreciate your perspective, your experience today. We know it is early in this investigation, and obviously we have to use caution as we try to determine the cause of that midair collision. Thank you so much, John.